Are you a woman going through a breakup or a separation? I'll be sharing how my own separation transformed my marriage. If you're new to this channel, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my weekly videos. 6 months ago, I left my marriage and it was the scariest, boldest, and bravest things I'd ever done. Now, to be honest, for some time things were not so okay in my relationship, and I remember a while back I was seated home alone on a Friday night and the word seduction came at the back of my mind. So I started doing a lot of research. I went onto YouTube, read books, and that's how I even got my mentor and started my own feminine self-development journey. Now I've been on this journey for the last 3 years and I did it by myself, and December last year when it reached, I just felt like no, I just wanted out. I was also dealing with my mom's illness, and she died early this year, and I felt like no, things were not going on well in my relationship. I'm having to deal with my mom who was ailing. I felt like I just needed time out. So I packed my bags and left. And I can promise you the 6 month separation, because we've just come back together and it's so amazing. I can promise you this period where I went away literally changed my relationship. Now, the first thing I did was I just wanted time to myself. I realized how I never really gave a lot of time to myself. I never had the space to just think about me when I was married for 10 years. Yes, I would spend time by myself, but I was always looking after my husband, looking after my child, looking after everyone else. And I just spent this time, first of all, by myself, reconnecting with myself. And I even got a spiritual mentor because my mother also, she died when I was actually separated and she had no idea. I'm sure she'd have, I don't know, if she knew, she probably would have been like, oh my God, what the hell are you doing? So the first thing I did, I got a mentor to work with me, because having to deal with that change of my marriage and having to deal with the loss of my mom, I felt I needed support. Then the second thing, I decided to get healthy. And this is so interesting because honestly, the first week when I moved out and when I was in my new apartment, I was like, Linda, what are you doing? Did you make the right decision? What the hell? Like I was by myself, and I remember for like 2 days, I was like, I just felt like I couldn't wake up. But I decided, you know what? I was lucky because I saw a health and fitness challenge and I decided to get into it. So I started working on my nutrition journey. I started getting healthy. In fact, I made some lifestyle changes, yeah? I cut out on wheat, I cut out on alcohol. So I just wanted to start to feel myself again as me. So I cleaned up my diet and I started, my whole healthy lifestyle journey. And I can promise you, my diet and my exercising, and I walk until today every evening, really, really helped calm my mind. Because honestly, getting separated is scary. Like, you're in between. You don't know whether you've made the right decision. I'd even sometimes find myself thinking, what is my hubby doing? Or, I just be like, what does my child think? I felt just getting healthy again really helped calm my nerves. Okay? Then the other thing that I found was really, really helpful, I decided to become social again. So I reconnected with some of my friends, and this one I did with intention, yeah, because I wanted to start dating myself. Like, I wanted to take myself out to nice places, to be around nice places, and to get comfortable being by myself. Because when I was married, a lot of the activities were joint activities, and it was a very, very different feeling to start, having a whole weekend by yourself or having evenings by myself, I had to learn how to start dating myself. Now, I remember one of my friends was like, "Oh, Linda, now that you're separated, you should probably start meeting new men." And I was like, "No." In fact, if there was anything that I was so clear about, was I didn't want to start a whole new other relationship. For me, I was really clear that my separation, to be honest, I thought I was gonna get divorced. That's just the truth, yeah? I knew I'm coming out of this, and I knew that eventually I'll get divorced. I did not in any way think about us coming back together. It was just not an option. I don't know why, yeah, for me, I didn't honestly think that we would ever come back together again. So yeah, one of my friends was like, "Okay, Linda, start dating again, start meeting new men." In my mind, I'm like, no. In my mind, I knew I needed time to myself. I needed time to be clear on what my next steps are. I needed time to know what exactly am I thinking, what am I feeling outside all these external influences, outside having to think about my child, what he'd think, outside having to think about what people would tell me. I needed time to myself. So dating or meeting new men, no, I did not do that. However, the one thing that I was so intentional about was I knew that I'd given myself 6 months to be clear. And it was so interesting because by, I think, 3 weeks after getting separated, hubby was like, "Okay, let's have a conversation." So you see, the pressure will start to build up. It will start to build because remember, you guys have been living as a couple, now you're living apart, there's a vacuum. But I knew that I was not ready, and I would not be ready even after 3 months. So I had to like have a conversation with him and tell him that for me, I will need at least 3 months just to center myself. Then we could now come and speak and see, am I really ready to have a conversation about our relationship? Remember, by the time you're leaving your marriage, you've probably had a lot of pent up anger, pent up resentment, because that's what I did. I had a lot of emotions and feelings that I'd never really processed. And there's no way 1 month was gonna be enough. In fact, there was even another friend, she was like, "Oh, so what's your hubby saying? Are you guys going to go back together?" In my mind, I'm thinking, this is a whole marriage, this is a relationship. You can't make a decision based on being apart for 2 weeks. And I've stumbled onto some really interesting concept. And what it was saying was, by the time you're leaving a relationship, like picture your relationship as a cup that's filled with water. So every day you do nice things to each other, you're filling the cup, you're filling it up. By the time you're deciding you're leaving, it's like the cup is empty. That is why you're leaving the relationship. So for you to even be able to go back and have a conversation, you need to start filling in the cup again, slowly by slowly. And to me, it made so much sense because emotionally, there was even no way I was going to sit and start having a reconciliation conversation after I've just left the relationship. The good thing, my hubby is a great man, so he understood. He's like, "That's fine. We'll talk about it." We set a timeline, and he's like, "Okay, we'll revisit our relationship at that particular point in time." So then the other thing I had to think about was my son. He goes to school. I had now to make a decision, of course, together with hubby, like to tell the teacher, the class teacher, because remember, if you have a child, your separation is going to affect the child. So we had to have a conversation around, first of all, co-parenting. And I can promise you, if you're like me, by the time you're deciding to leave a relationship, you've probably thought through so many things. I'd even remember I thought I was gonna get divorced, so I'd even taken a divorce class, and in that divorce class, there were I remember they had listed several styles of co-parenting. So I'd already looked at some options and I'd already selected one. So I was like, okay, let me tell my husband that this is how I foresee um, us co-parenting the child. And luckily he was okay with it. He was very supportive. So we had now to jointly tell the teacher that we are separated, and if there's anything that you notice in my son in school, know that this is the change that he's going through. And I can promise you, co-parenting was not a joke, yeah? Co-parenting was not a joke. So we chose the model of, it was called 2-3-2. So 2 days with him, 3 days with me, and then the weekend, and then vice versa. And there are various models of co-parenting that were being suggested depending on how close you are with your, depending on the kind of relationship you have with your man. If probably you have a very high conflict relationship, so there were some co-parenting styles that were suggested. Happy and I, we are very low conflict. So the 2 days, 3 days change between the two homes was something that was that we could work with. And it's interesting. Um, we got one of the nannies because we have two nannies. So one nanny would stay with me and then switch back and forth between the two homes. So that was honestly that was draining, yeah, because you can imagine every 2 days or my son would come, then he'd go over for the weekend, then come like that. So it was really an emotionally draining period. The other thing that I learned, on top of work, getting a mentor to walk with me throughout the process and just the whole journey of grieving, my relationship and grieving the loss of my mom, on top of having to work on my health and my diet, just to, make myself feel good, look good, and be in a high vibe mode. And I also decided, oh yeah, and also on top of not dating, like being intentional in terms of not jumping into any relationship, I also decided to get clear on what exactly I want in a man. This is so interesting because I'd never really revisited what my core values were after being married for 10 years. And it was such an eye opening moment because the values that I held dear to me when I was getting married 10 years ago had absolutely changed. Because as a woman have grown, as a woman have changed, my values have changed. So revisiting my love list was a very, very key and a very, very important thing that I had to do. And it made me really think about how sometimes when we are getting married, we don't really put a lot of emphasis on our love lists. Like thinking back at my sessions during premarital counseling, I remember it was a lot on, those sessions were a lot about our personality styles. And thinking back, I'm like, we already engaged. What are the odds that you will break up your engagement based on your personality styles? I think that if I was to do things differently, I'd probably focus on having a love list. I would also focus on updating my love list every so often. I'd also focus on being more intentional in the marriage. Like the same way you upgrade your degrees, your certificates, I think one thing that would have really helped our marriage was to just update some of the things that if we feel we are struggling with a certain area, to just pick a mentor or to pick a class, sit down and just learn a little bit more. Because I honestly realized that I'd taken my marriage for granted. I'd totally taken my marriage for granted. Like, I thought that if you're married, then you know how to be married. But the thing is, once you get married, the dynamics change and your relationship skills also need to evolve. And that's a one area I'd completely neglected. So I look back and I say, had I not taken this space to just get in tune with who I am as a woman, with who Linda is, I'd probably have continued to stay in a relationship that's deteriorating. And by the time we'd have reached year number 20, we'll probably not even be speaking to each other. Like, I remember there was a point where the conversations were really about, oh, so what bill needs to be paid, or which projects are being worked on, or what investments. Like, they were really just focused on logistics and errands and projects. And that meant that the connection was really not there. Yeah. Because I realized that you can be talking to your man, but you're not really communicating or you're not really connecting. There will be no difference between him being with another, with his boy at home and talking. The only difference is probably how you look, because you really just took for granted the fact that yes, there is marriage, but there's also you and there's also him, and there's the romantic side of the relationship that needs to be cultivated separate from the marriage as an entity. So with the co-parenting, something else also came up, and it really made me appreciate just how much um, it takes to be a good parent. Like, with the whole moving up and down, we had to reorganize everything around now the two homes. And you see things like communicating between the two. Like, I am the direct contact with the school. So there were some certain school meetings, certain events that were happening in school that needed me to communicate with him and for him to come through. And I remember there's a single mom in my son's school, and she was telling me like her relationship with her baby daddy is technically non-existent. So it just made me appreciate the kind of man that I have. At least we can be able to have a conversation, and if it's around my son, our son, at least we can come together and agree on that level. And I underestimated the shame, the amount of shame that I felt, the amount of guilt that I felt for being separated. In fact, I never even I only told my married friends last week that I was separated for 6 months. I didn't tell them. I think my father got to know through someone else. I don't know how word spread around for some reason. I underestimated just how much of shame I'd feel. Like, you feel like you're a failure of sorts, yeah? And I really was intentional not to feel that way, because I had to keep reminding myself that I'm moving out for a reason. There is definitely a reason why I made the decision I made. And looking back, I would not have done it any other way, because I know the kind of people I have around me. They are very loving, and sometimes, yeah, they can cross boundaries. I wanted to make my decision based on what was right for me, not based on any external pressure, not based on having to feel guilty because of my son, not I wanted to make my decisions solely based on me. And that is something that, if you're going through a breakup, shut out all the noises. because ultimately you know what you're feeling deep down. People will try to tell you things that have worked for them. Remember, those things have worked for them. They are not in your shoe. They are not the wearer of the shoe. I remember even a while back, there was a really good friend of mine. She was going through a rough patch in her marriage. She'd break up and make up and break up and make up. And there was once she came and she was like, I really wish I didn't listen to people. I really wish I didn't ask for people's opinions. I probably would have broken up earlier and I would have not wasted a lot of my time. That goes to show that ultimately it's you who has to make the decision, it's you who has to make the choice. And for me, not listening to other people allowed me to really reach my decisions, to really tap into my personal truth, because to me, this is my life. It is my life. And eventually, we got ready. I was ready now to have a conversation with hubby. And yeah, we went and we met. And this is also another tip. Do not rush your makeup. Do not rush the reconciliation. Work through your emotions. Work through your feelings. You cannot rush it. I know it's so tempting to think that, oh my God, my man will get another babe. In fact, yeah, that's what one of my friends asked me. They're like, what if your husband gets another babe? In my mind, it's so clear. If he gets another woman, then we have no marriage. It's really that clear. Because if you're truly committed to your partner and you know you're working through issues and you've communicated timelines for when you two will come together, technically you guys are not single. You're not married. I mean, you're not single. So if one of you decides to step out and now start to entertain other women and get other women, then know your bond, there's something that's not right. For me, it was a deal breaker. I didn't even have to tell him, by the way. I didn't have to tell him that if you get another woman, it's over. I didn't have to. Because I knew deep down, he understood what me leaving the marriage meant. Yeah? So don't feel under pressure to do things just out of fear. And it also comes back to you. What was the reason why you two broke up? How committed are you two? How committed is your man? I look at my separation like an initiation process. It was a process that we had to go through to come out, to see whether we truly are committed to each other. We had to go through that process. And it's so interesting, like, by the time now I was ready, I told him, now I'm ready, we can have the conversation. I was really clear in terms of what my feelings were. And this is the other thing. Once you are ready, once you filled up that cup, remember that cup I told you about? The cup that you need to start filling slowly. And how you fill in that cup when you're separated is giving each other the right amount of space. The biggest mistake you can do when you're going through a separation is to try to patch things up too soon. Give each other the space. Give each other the space. Focus on you. Focus on your growth, on your own healing. Focus on you. Give your man the space that you need, and naturally, once you are ready, you are free to let him know that you're now ready to have a conversation. And when you're going to have a conversation, what I'd encourage you is don't rush to patch things up, even if you've been apart for 6 months. We were apart for 6 months and it took us several conversations. And I was really sure about the one outcome I wanted after we had our conversation. And for me, the outcome was to get a mentor for us to walk us through the journey. That was what I intended to do. Because remember, you've had issues, even if you've been apart from each other, you've had your misunderstanding, and those misunderstandings need to be resolved. And remember, they can either be resolved or not. So for me, the option I suggested was for us to get a mentor. Luckily, I'd identified one, and they had a program, a 4-week program, and we sat through it. I think it was the most life-changing thing I've ever done in our marriage. It was the most life-changing thing, because within the 4 or is it 5 weeks, we sat through the sessions. Like, it was so clear. It was so clear what the next steps were. It was so clear. And I think when it comes to two people, you're either committed to making things work or not. I didn't have to convince my hubby for us to sit through the mentorship session. He didn't have to convince me to do anything. Like, it was just a conversation, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And he tells me something, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's try it out. And then you start to do it. So if you find yourself like you're bringing up a possible suggestion and it's being met with a lot of resistance, then know something is there's probably a little bit more that you need to deal with to make things work. If your man really values you, if you value each other, for you to grow through the breakup, there has to be a process. The biggest mistake you can make is you stay separated, then because you miss each other, you want to come back. And you come back together, you think you've resolved the issues. How do you know things are resolved? How do you know? That's why for me it was really important to get guidance from a couples mentor to just make sure that we are on the right path. The issue of sex when you're separated, that's another one. And this one, well, I underestimated just how much of a thing it would be, because definitely you're a feminine woman, yeah? You have feelings. So the one thing I can tell you during a breakup, don't rush to sleeping with your ex. Already there are issues there. Sex will only complicate things. I would also not suggest you going to get another man to do for one night stands or casual hookups. I really wouldn't, because remember, you still have the emotional baggage from your relationship. Then coming to deal with another human being with their energy might just complicate things. I would highly, highly suggest to spend time reconnecting with who you are as a woman. Own your pleasure. Self-pleasure is really a thing. Please, this is the right time. As you're getting clear about what you want, as you're reconnecting with yourself, self-pleasure will be your best friend. And yes, when you're going to have the conversation with your man, speak in terms of feelings. There is a way you prepare your conversation. It's so easy to go and start blaming him, coming up with lists of, on this day you did this, on this day you did that, 3 years ago you did this, blah, blah, blah. No. Speak in terms of feelings. Express your feelings to him. And it's not easy for many women to be vulnerable, but this is where your vulnerability comes into play. Speak in terms of what his actions made you feel. Men understand when women speak to them from a feelings point of view. Okay, so we went through so my long story short, we went through the sessions with the mentor. We were able to really get to the root of our issues, and we eventually have, and this is the biggest takeaway, we have a whole new relationship contract. This is an agreement in terms of how we want our relationship to be. And this is something that signifies how we are approaching our new relationship. So, based on the agreements around our responsibilities at home, agreement about our communication, about our romantic time, about how we handle our whole entire relationship, that is what we are basing our current marriage on. And I can promise you. In fact, I moved back home. I moved back home a month ago, right in time. Yeah, I moved back home a month ago, and I'm actually serving notice for my apartment, and I'm giving my landlord the key next week. I can promise you, I was even telling him I've never been happier. I have never been happier. I think this breakup was exactly what I needed, what he needed for us to just reconnect and remind us what is important. And I'm so excited for what the future has in store for us. And yeah, I really hope this story inspires somebody. And remember, not every breakup will lead to a makeup, but if you do it in the right way, if you have a great man, if you have a man who honors you and a man who you respect, I strongly feel like you can actually get over your breakup and start your relationship afresh. Yeah. So let me know what your thoughts are, and if you're looking to work with me, check out. I've left my details in the description box, and speak soon. Bye.